So today we're going to talk about just a quick review of a 2024 Surgeon General Advisory on parenting. So it's titled Parents Under Pressure. It's from the previous Surgeon General. There's a link and in the slides, and then I did post a PDF copy onto iEcho, so you can take a look at that. So just as a reminder, a Surgeon General's advisory is a public statement that calls the American people's attention to some urgent public health issue and provides recommendations for how it should be addressed. Advisories are reserved for significant public health challenges that require the nation's immediate awareness and action. And this particular advisory came on the heels of the 2023 advisory on youth mental health and social media, and on the advisory on loneliness and social connection. So in a sense, there's almost kind of nothing quite new or surprising in this advisory, but it really is asking us to pay closer attention to what's, kind of specific to parents and parenting. Even if the novel aspect is that there's actually being attention paid to the challenges faced by parents. According to a study by the American Psychological Association that was published in 2023, post-COVID, the entire nation is still suffering from what they're referring to as a collective trauma. They note that beyond just the pandemic, issues like global conflict, racism, racial injustice, inflation, climate-related disasters are all weighing on the collective consciousness of the American people. And among adults surveyed in the Stress in America survey, parents seem to be faring the worst. Compared to most other adults and other adults surveyed, parents report that they feel so stressed that it impairs their functioning most days, and that most days their stress feels completely overwhelming. Many parents feel that no one understands how stressed they are, and they're thus attempting to carry the burden alone. And 2/3 of adults, so about 66%, said that in the last 12 months they definitely could have used more emotional support than they had received, and around 1/4 of those cited the need for a lot more support. And so what's stressing parents? Plenty is stressing parents. I think all of us could speak to that who are parents, and those who aren't parents yet can speak to it from looking at the parents around them or their own parents. But one unsurprising thing that's been stressing parents is finances. 46% of parents, compared to 34% of other adults, report that there was an increase in financial strain in their household. Aside from feeling strapped for cash, parents feel strapped for time, and they're struggling to balance occupational needs, occupational requirements, and family responsibilities. Parents are generally stressed about their family's health, both themselves, spouses, their children. But comparing pre to post-pandemic survey results, parents were more likely to report having a chronic illness today than they were in 2019. About half of adults said it stresses them that the news is not focusing on what is most important to them on a day-to-day basis, which, considering how much distraction the news is causing just for all of us, the fact that the news is not necessarily addressing what we want it to or what we feel like is important is, that's an additional stressor. And 3 in 5 adults says it stresses them that politicians aren't talking about the things that are most important to them. And on top of it all, few reported confidence about the direction our country is going or said that they feel that their government representative had their best interest in mind. Aside from finances, their own health or that of a spouse or partner, nearly 3 in 4 parents worry that their child will struggle with mental health issues, whether that's depression, anxiety, eating disorders. Parents worry a lot about safety, the safety of their children. We spoke a few weeks ago about how some of this is not fully aligned with the facts. For example, concerns about abduction are higher than what actually is seen in realistic statistics. However, other concerns are. For example, another Surgeon General's advisory to come out in 2024 was around firearm violence. The advisory notes that in 2022, Black Americans endured the highest age-adjusted firearm homicide across all ages, while white Americans, ages 45 years and older, had the highest rate of firearm suicide. Males died at 6 times the rate of overall as females, but firearms are used in about 50% of all interpersonal violence-related homicides. And in 2021, the proportion of homicides attributable to interpersonal violence was 5 times higher for female victims as compared to male victims. When looking at youth, males die by firearms at a higher rate than females, white children and adolescents had about 29% of their deaths by firearm were homicide and 63% were suicide. Among black children and adolescents, 86% of firearm-related deaths were homicide and 10% were suicide. But the CDC data for 2022 actually shows that the firearm suicide rate amongst black adolescents surpassed the rate among white adolescents for the first time in our recorded history of taking such stats. So what the average American parent likely worries about is a mass shooting, which only accounts for about 1% of all gun deaths, but concern about gun deaths is quite valid. There's also changing culture and social pressures on both youth and parents. What I think about around this is, and my children are both adults right now, but I think about how early in high school my local school district was trying to put kids into categories or educational tracks, assuming that a ninth grader has any idea what they want to do with the rest of their life or what they want their career to be. The amount of resume padding that I watch parents push for their kids, or kids attempt to engage in, or even our students attempt to engage in, because they're concerned about what the future is going to look like for them. How will they be able to fare in the future? Will they be able to get a good job? Will they be able to afford a house? All of these things, and parents worry about their child's future quite a bit too. The advisory calls attention to parental stress and mental health. I'm not going to spend too much time here because Danelle did a great job covering it last week, so I will refer you to the recording of that. And thankfully, she is here to talk about this a little bit again if folks have a particular space around this. But in addition to just being aware that a number of parents who do face mental health challenges, and that is going to add extra stress onto the family, we need to be supportive of that. Certain families might face higher rates of challenges, stressors, and mental health conditions. LGBTQ families are under more pressure now than they ever have been in my adult life. They deserve extra support. The same goes for families in poverty, racial and ethnic minorities, immigrant families, or families who might have been here for generations but have family members immigrating or attempting to immigrate, or even experiencing stress in another country. Separation, divorce, new relationships, blended families, all of these families look different, and we need to be mindful of different family structures. And anytime there is a disruption to family structure, all of that can cause an additional source of stress, or potentially alleviate some kinds of stress. It really just depends, but it's something that we should be mindful of. And there's also an increase in people other than the biological parents raising children without a biological parent in the house, whether that's grandparents, other relatives, non-biological family. So lots of families are looking maybe different than the prototypical or old stereotypical idea of what a nuclear family looked like. So what does the Surgeon General recommend for action? There's a number of things, and I encourage you to take a look at the document itself, but some of it is stuff that I think we can have an impact on. Some of it's going to be a little bit harder, and trying to kind of push for larger social change, both from a governmental level to institutional and employer level. Obviously, things like financial assistance programs for those who are having financial difficulties. Lots of employment policies that could be more supportive or helpful to parents. A lot of this has to do with a cultural shift towards being more attentive to the value of parenting, and to the role that parenting plays in society and our lives. So a big piece of this advisory was really just trying to highlight that parenting is really important. And while our society for so long, you think about when you meet new people and you ask, so what do you do? What does your spouse do? And all too often people are then focused on, what is the occupation or profession that you land in? And for some people that is parenting. I don't know how many of you watched the show Shrinking, but in season 2, I thought that the show creators did a really nice job of speaking to this. I won't even begin to try to summarize, but they did a nice job trying to highlight that it's okay, and we should be supportive of somebody's main role in life and what they feel like they excel at is parenting. Those individuals need as much support as anybody else. Another cultural shift would be kind of to supporting youth as a collective responsibility. And we talked about this several weeks ago when we talked about the book, The Anxious Generation. It used to take a village, and people took that role, very seriously. So can't we do that again? That provides a little bit of extra support to parents. Reducing stigma around talking about the struggles of parenting. Parenting is not easy. One of the things that helped me survive it when my kids were younger was being able to talk to other parents. Talking about unreasonable expectations that are placed on both youth and parents. And that could help to shift some of the stigma and maybe even shift some of the struggles, shifting the expectations to be more reasonable. Also, it's important to combat loneliness and reduce isolation, offering practical support. And one of the things that obviously this program, I think, highlights, was also mentioned in that advisory, was the importance of supporting integrated primary and mental health care so that folks can get all of their needs addressed, whether that is physical health, mental health, or somewhere the intersection of the two. So in addition to the main advisory, I did pull from some of the citations that Dr. Murthy referenced within the advisory itself, so you can see all of those. But now I'll just leave it open. So what are your thoughts, your recommendations for supporting parents, whether that's parents that you work with, one another, yourselves, however you feel like is best to take this conversation now.